Hi everyone, welcome back to A Little More Inspired. My name is Blanca. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to hit the follow and subscribe button so that you never miss any of my new episodes. And please be sure to check out my website, alittle.moreinspired.com, so that you can explore all of my content. So in this episode, I will be going through part 2 of The Voice of Desires for the book The 3 Ordinary Voices of God by Matthew Kelly. This is the final voice, and I will be completing my series of The 3 Ordinary Voices of God. Please go check out episode 1, where I break down our desires and discernment of what desires to follow and which ones to move away from. Physical desires is the first one that we start with because I think it's the first one that most people think of when we're discussing desires. When we think of physical desires, we tend to sexualize desires because we live in a hypersexualized culture. It's very narrow-minded to think of desires in just that one way. So physical desires are good and they are real, and there is no shame in having them because God wouldn't have given them to us if He didn't want us to experience them. But they sit at the lowest level of the hierarchy of desire. Our culture overemphasizes them, especially pleasure and sexuality, causing people to confuse gratification with fulfillment. Physical desires must be enjoyed within context and governed by higher desires. Many physical desires are luxury wants, not necessarily true needs. Comfort often exceeds necessity. For example, if you have more than you need, then you'll want like a bigger home where you have even more space. Even though there's nothing wrong with having those things, you have to be honest with yourself that it's really a want and not necessarily a need. Pleasure is good, but not the ultimate aim in life. A life centered on pleasure cannot produce a fully integrated human being. For example, like I just recently watched the P. Diddy documentary, so it's like the only one that I have in my mind. He's like the perfect example of desires running rampant for all the wrong reasons. He desired comfort, money, power, pleasure at an excessive rate because he didn't have good moral compass. He did really horrendous things, and nothing is ever enough for somebody like that. And he can't see the harm that he's doing because he's completely entangled into his own selfishness. You can look at P. Diddy and say, oh, maybe he's a fully realized person because he has power, status, and all of these things. But is that really an example of a fully integrated human? I don't think so. I think it shows an example of a person that's lost complete control in a society that rewards those kinds of selfish people because he's been able to get away with so much disgusting behavior because most of us pedestalize people with money. For example, I was recently talking to someone who was telling me that they love Becca Bloom, and she's just like a TikTok influencer who is really wealthy and posts things about her wealth and everything that she has. All the comments on her videos are like, this is rich, riching right. And you just see that so many normal people are just praising her for rich, riching right because we think that that's the ultimate goal of life. And I think to myself, I don't think that she's rich, riching right because somebody who lives in such excess spends so much of her time just consuming material things and purchasing things that she doesn't even need. I don't find that to be somebody that I want to look up to. I also don't find her to be inspiring. I think that if a rich person riching right is somebody who helps the poor, who donates their money for good causes, who has a good impact on society and moves it forward. I recently was watching the show Guinness. It's about the Guinness Empire. And there's like a brother in the show named Edward. And I really liked the character in the show. And so I got really curious about him. So I went down a rabbit hole of reading about this guy. And he is an example of riching right because he worked really hard to expand his father's business. Mr. Guinness was the one who created the Guinness Empire. He created the Guinness beer, which he started off in Ireland and he took it to England. Once he dies, he leaves his older son and Edward, his empire. He inherits it to them. And one of the brothers is so deep entrenched in his lifestyle of luxury and wealth, and he doesn't really want to do anything with it other than what's already been made out of it. He doesn't have a vision, and he wants to live an what is it called? Not aristocratic. He wants to live an aristocratic life, and he likes all of the benefits that come with being really wealthy. And then Edward, who is the visionary, he ends up expanding and he brings it to America. At one point, he ends up becoming the wealthiest man in England, and he buys his brother's share because his brother doesn't want to work hard for the business. I got really interested in Edward because I really liked how he seemed to have a lot of integrity, and because he has a vision for what his father has given him, and he has a vision of expanding and making it an internationally well-known and recognized business. But he doesn't use his influence or his money just for his own selfish gain. He ends up marrying a woman that is very religious, and she really influences him to do good in the world. And he is inspired by her desire to help others. At least from what I read, she really inspires him to become this very socially responsible billionaire because he creates employee welfare. He paid above average wages, provided free healthcare via a dispensary, and established pension plans which were unknown. He basically created that for his time. And housing, he created the Guinness Trust for slum clearance and affordable housing in both London and in Dublin. And those housings that he created, the Guinness Trust, they still exist today and are still functioning. I don't agree with the way that we pedestalize wealthy people in this country. We pedestalize them and we think that they're holier than thou just because they have money. I recently have been reading this book on Saint Padre Pio, which is this saint from Italy. And he is the saint who had the stigmatas. He died in the 60s, and he had a lot of money donated to the church that he was at because of all the miracles he did and all of the followers that believed in him. I went to his museum recently, and the mother had somebody prophesize to her that he would touch a lot of money, or he'd have access to a lot of money, but that he would never use it for his own selfish gain, that he would do a lot with it. And Padre Pio viewed money as a tool for God's work, not an end goal, emphasizing reliance on divine providence while serving the poor, and lived a very humble life. And he built a hospital that is still used now, where he brought modern medical research to the area in Italy where he lives. He also helped give free healthcare to the people of his town. That is from one priest, and all of his donations. He was able to do that for his community. Imagine if these really wealthy people who are seeking out money on purpose, what they could do for humanity if they used that money for the greater good of the world, or if they didn't hoard so much of it. And I'm not saying that you don't deserve your hardworking earned money, but at some point you have to realize that you don't even need that much. So why wouldn't you use it to help others? Our society really encourages this kind of behavior, this selfish behavior, because we believe that our ultimate purpose is to live for our pleasures. I think that if you're being led by God, God will guide you to do the right thing when you have access to things. And that's why Matthew Kelly says that we need more people desiring the right things for the right reasons. Physical desires rank low in the hierarchy. This is an observation, not a condemnation, and we must look for the desire beneath the desire. And, if you want to get real religious about it, I've been thinking about the idea of why Adam and Eve are examples of untamed desires, and why I think that they represent the lower energies that most people live in. Because Adam and Eve were created good with good desires, and desire itself was not the problem. The problem was how they desired. What went wrong in Eden is that their desire became immediate instead of patient, self-directed instead of God-directed, suspicious of God instead of trusting, grasping instead of receiving. What was untamed was the refusal to wait and trust. So Adam and Eve is another example of human beings who hadn't learned to trust God's direction and God's desire to lead them. They became impatient and so they became tempted. And Adam's failure wasn't passion, it was his passivity. He didn't protect the order of love, he followed desire without discernment. We now have Joseph and Mary as the new Adam and Eve. Joseph and Mary stand at the beginning of the new creation, just as Adam and Eve stood at the beginning of the first. But they responded to desire the opposite way of Adam and Eve. That's why it's important to learn from Jesus' parents, why their story matters, and why it's important to learn from their wisdom, because they were here to correct where Adam and Eve failed. In the way that Mary is the new Eve, where Eve said, I will take, she was tempted because the devil tempts her and gives her these false illusions. So she takes it. And then Mary said, let it be done to me according to your word. You know, when Mary is told by the angel Gabriel that she's going to have Jesus, who will be the key to salvation, she thinks about the decision. She doesn't say yes immediately. She thinks about it and she asks for clarification, like, what do you mean? I'm sure she had many desires because Mary was about to start her young married life. But because she trusts God above all things and she wants God above all things, she's willing to take the harder path and she goes, let it be done to me according to your word. She trusts in God's guidance, not her own desires. And so Mary's desire was total, surrendered, trusting, where Eve's was impulsive. She desired God's will above comfort, above control. This is wise desire, desire that listens before it acts. Why Joseph is the new Adam. Joseph is the antidote to Adam's passivity. Adam stood silent in the garden. Joseph stands awake in uncertainty. That's why I think Joseph an example of really healthy masculinity, where I think that a lot of men live in like the spirit of Adam, where they're just like following their senses. They have no self-control, no self-discipline. Joseph accepts responsibility without understanding. He protects what he did not create. He obeys God without public recognition. Joseph is known as the silent saint. He never asked to be seen. He supported Mary in her journey and protected her in Jesus, and was a husband to Mary and a father to Jesus, his adopted son. And he loves without possession. He doesn't feel entitled to them. He, feels reverence for them because he feels so lucky that he has been chosen for this mission. Joseph's desire faithfulness over reputation. In one of the books I read about Mary, it talks about how Joseph got really scared when he realized that Mary was pregnant and he wanted to divorce her. And that's very human of him, there. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to include, because just like Mary asked for clarification before agreeing to God's plan, you see the humanity in Joseph, that he was afraid. When God sends a message through his dreams, he becomes brave and courageous and understands that being with Mary will come with gossip and with a sense of people thinking they know who they are. But he knows that God is guiding him. So he leads not on his own understanding, but in what God wants for him. Joseph shows us that masculine desire becomes holy when it protects instead of consumes. There was a time where I always wondered why Mary and Joseph in the story, they surrender their bodies and their spirits to God. So they both live a celibate life, but they're married. And I think that now that I'm maturing in my way of thinking and in my way of being, I understand why that is necessary. Because if you look at our society now, where people are constantly following their physical desires. They cheat on their wives and there's no integrity, and women feel like they don't owe another woman respect because it's not them who is cheating on the wife and it's his like I've heard that before from women. Why Mary and Joseph in the story are meant to be celibate and why that is important is because Mary and Joseph love each other's souls before they love each other's bodies. and they both desire God more than they desire each other. And it's not that their relationship is out of convenience. Their relationship is based out of true love because he loves her and she loves him. But they also both have like deep respect for one another and for the mission that God has for them. They are an example of what true love is. That love isn't about a feeling, but it's about a choice that you make to be with somebody in the highs and lows, and that you understand that your purpose together is also serving God's purpose. Adam and Eve is untamed desire because it took before they were ready. They wanted wisdom without obedience and desired God's gift more than God. And they end up suffering for their choices rather than being wise in their decision making. And Joseph and Mary are wise in desire because they waited in faith. When Mary realizes that Joseph is afraid, she doesn't run after him. She doesn't go chasing after him. She trusts in God's plan, and she trusts that whatever God has in store for her, she's going to be able to handle. And she waits, and he does. He comes back and desired God's will above all outcomes. They lived a hard life. Jesus didn't have an easy life, and he was perfect. They lived a nomadic life where they were poor and they were immigrants, and they followed the signs where God wanted them to be for the greater good of the world. And they obeyed without clarity. They didn't always understand why God wanted to send them in that direction, but they trusted that they were doing the right thing because their heart was always pure. Joseph and Mary didn't have tainted hearts. They wanted the right things for the right reason. And that's why God chose them, because they had pure hearts. They were humble. They had no ill intention for anyone or anything. Adam understands the hierarchy, but still Adam still chooses Eve over God. And the choice is crucial. Adam says essentially, I cannot live without her. This is disordered love. This is why in Christian tradition later reads that Joseph and Mary are the healed mirror of Adam and Eve, because Adam receives a bride, loves her rightly at first, then allows desire to override obedience. And Joseph receives a bride, loves her deeply, subordinates desire to God's will. Joseph feels desire, but he does not let desire command him. And this is called wise desire. So yeah, I think that's it for physical desires. So next we're going to talk about our emotional desires, are deeper than physical desires and cannot be rushed or instantly gratified. They point to our longing for connection, belonging, and love. Emotional desires mature slowly and require patience, vulnerability, and right ordering. Matthew Kelly is saying here that emotional desires cannot be instantly satisfied. They develop through time, relationships, and sacrifice. Core emotional desires include love, intimacy, friendship, trust, and acceptance and belonging. We desire to share joy because shared joy increases joy. We desire companionship and suffering, not solutions, but presence. Emotional expression must be with the right person, at the right time, in the right way. Emotional desires change throughout life. They are personal and must be discerned, not indulged blindly. Emotional desires often reveal deeper needs beneath the surface of feelings. Emotional desires are good. They become wrongly placed when they are asked to do a job they were never meant to do. Emotional desire is wrongly placed when it becomes the ultimate guide, when we're just guided by a feeling, no self-control of like the way that we react to things. Emotions are meant to inform, not govern. When emotional desire leads, we start making decisions based on how something feels right now. Fear of loss, fear of discomfort, fear of being alone. For example, staying in relationships that contradict your values because you don't want to feel lonely. Avoiding necessary truth because it feels uncomfortable. The emotional desire of overriding intellectual and spiritual discernment. We're not just here to feel good things. We're here to learn from hard emotions as well. I realize now that learning through the story of Joseph and Mary is that even though I do want a relationship, I know that that's not my ultimate desire and that God might not will that for me. That might not be in the plan God has for me. Like maybe I'm meant to be a single woman for the rest of my life. Is it something that I necessarily feel positive about at first? No, because our society tells us that finding a relationship for a woman and being a mom and, having a home is like the ultimate fulfillment. But God doesn't desire that for all of us. I want what God wants for me more than anything else, which is why I understand now why Mary and Joseph are the way that they are in their relationship, because they are the example. When our emotional desires are misplaced, we're looking for constant validation from others. We're looking for people to tell us that we're great, that we're doing the right thing, because that's the only time we feel good about our decisions. If people like you, like I think one of my biggest vices in my life has been that I've loved to be liked. And in many ways, not being liked has been very painful for me. I realize now that I had to go through those experiences because I had to realize that that kind of validation doesn't really matter and it's not really important. So emotional desire is wrongly placed when it replaces commitment with intensity. Strong emotion can feel like love, purpose, or calling, but intensity is not depth. We leave when feelings fade. Sometimes emotional desire doesn't want love, it wants comfort. Misplacement shows up as avoiding difficult conversations, avoiding solitude, avoiding silence, avoiding discipline. Growth always asks more of us than comfort is willing to give. So emotional desires are meant to connect us, not command us. When they become your guide instead of our signal, they lead us away from wisdom. And lastly, it's our intellectual desires. What the author is saying here is that intellectual desire is the human longing to understand, learn, and seek truth, and it is a sign of human flourishing, but many people abandon it early due to discouragement, rigid systems, or fear. Without intellectual desire, wisdom cannot grow. Some of the key points here are that intellectual desire is the love of learning and understanding. And you can ask God for these virtues. Like I've asked God to give me the virtue of understanding, to understand what He means. It is essential for growth and maturity. This world tries to teach you how to think and how to follow rules blindly, but it forgets to teach you how to think critically and like how to question things. And you should question everything that you read, and you should be curious, and you should fall into rabbit holes of things that interest you. And you shouldn't always be so afraid of like information. If you're always asking God for discernment and you ask God for the truth with a humble heart, He will continue to show you truth at your capacity, and you will see yourself growing mentally. But a lot of the times we read things and we're so certain about our own truth that we don't realize that a wise person knows that he can learn from everyone. And that if you ask God for the truth with a humble heart, knowing that you don't know everything, wisdom will come to you in that way because of your own curiosity. And curiosity is discouraged through embarrassment, criticism, emphasizes on memorization. I always thought that I wasn't good at school because I wasn't good at testing. And so I, for a long time, thought that I was dumb and that I didn't have the capacity to love learning. But when I started to grow spiritually and God started guiding me and giving me this ferocious hunger to learn, I found that I love to learn and that I literally love a black hole of information. I feel like I'm always reading a book. God is always guiding me to a book that inspires me and that guides me. And I had this person the other day. I'm such a curious person. That's just how I am naturally. I'm always asking questions. I'm always like seeking to understand. And I think that that can annoy people sometimes because I had this person the other day yell at me because I guess I asked a question that they didn't find appropriate and I didn't mean anything by it. And she was like, "You're always gathering information and are you not aware of yourself? You're so nosy." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not nosy. I don't care about what people are doing in their lives. I would thought that I just was getting to know you." And yeah, that was a criticism that they gave me. But like where I know my jewel is, where I know my heart and light is in my curiosity. And not a lot of people are going to appreciate that. I took obviously her criticism with a grain of salt. It definitely made me more self-aware that not everybody is going to take my personality well, but I'm not going to stop being myself just because you don't like it. So sometimes the world is going to try to like poke out the things that make you you, and you shouldn't stop that from keeping you from being curious. Children naturally possess intellectual desire through wonder and why. And intellectual desire requires silence, leisure, stillness. Constant noise and distraction weaken our ability to think. Shallow thinking leads to shallow living. And deep thinking is necessary to solve real human problems. That's why the world, when they want to control a group of people, they'll make them dumb. They'll stop teaching them. They won't teach them how to read. They'll keep them intellectually unintelligent because a person that is well read, who loves to learn, who is curious, is able to think for themselves. The more you grow intellectually, the more you'll be able to understand your emotional desires. The more you rein in on your emotional desires, the more control you'll have over your physical desires. So desire becomes destructive only when lower desires lead and higher desires follow. We need to switch it. It has to go from the spiritual to the intellectual to the emotional to the physical, not the opposite way. So finally, the desire beyond the desire, which is our spiritual desires, the ultimate desire. Beneath every specific desire, physical, emotional, or intellectual, there is a deeper longing that cannot be fully satisfied by any created thing. Human desires don't end at pleasure, connection, or understanding. They point beyond them. When we follow our desires honestly and deeply enough, they eventually lead us to the one ultimate desire: fullness, wholeness, and union with God. This is not a rejection of human desires, but their fulfillment. Surface level desires are real, but they are not final. Every desire points beyond itself. If we keep asking, why do I want this? We keep going deeper. Key points here are: wanting pleasure is longing for peace or relief. Wanting success is longing for meaning or worth. Wanting love is actually longing to be known and chosen. Wanting comfort is longing for rest and security. The object changes, but the longing remains. So the human fulfillment is often short-lived. Even when we achieve what we want, the satisfaction fades. This does not mean that desire was wrong. It means it was incomplete. Achievement can often bring temporary satisfaction. Relationships cannot carry ultimate fulfillment, and pleasure fades quickly. The longing always returns. This return is not failure, it's an invitation to go deeper. So the ultimate desire is when the lesser desires are traced to their source, they change into one longing that cannot be reduced further. The ultimate desire is for wholeness. It's a desire for meaning, for love, for rest. No created thing can satisfy it fully. Only God is large enough to hold it. I've experienced this now. I really felt empty for a really long time. And I think that because I am such a spiritual person, even when I was in the world with friends and having fun, I really struggled in those scenes and in those areas. Like sometimes I would find myself like at parties and just feeling like this sense of detachment. Like even though I was having fun, I would find myself like thinking, what am I doing here? In the beginning, it didn't feel that way, but because my desire for God was becoming stronger but I wasn't ready to surrender the old life, I was living in this in-between world where like I felt really dissatisfied, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. This is why God is not one desire among many. He is the desire beneath them all. That dissatisfaction that a lot of people feel, that feeling of discontentment, it's because we desire something deeper. We desire something spiritual. What happens when the desire is ignored? When the ultimate desire is ignored, people try to force lesser desires to do what they cannot. I'm actually really grateful that I was raised in a Catholic religious household, even though for a time I kind of felt like I wouldn't come back and, I was a spiritual person and I only believed in the surface level of God, even though not really. But I think that because I wanted to do what I wanted to do, some of the sacrifices that come with a religious life, I didn't want to surrender to that yet. And I think that a lot of the times, superficial spirituality to me means I want to believe in a higher self, but I want to do whatever it is that I want. Fully committing to your relationship with God will mean certain sacrifices. Not everybody is ready for that yet. But once you fully commit, your life completely changes. But I don't think that the decisions to live kind of in order, they don't necessarily become a burden like they once felt like before, because I'm not really following people. I'm following God, and I feel like when I've been seeking out truth, it's led me to this truth. I don't feel that dissatisfaction anymore, even when I have less or have less extraordinary experiences. I think that the idea of going back to that life feels really heavy to me now. I don't want to go back to the dramas and the chaos. I kind of like living in peace now, and I don't know where God is guiding me at this point. But right now, I feel whole, and I don't think that I've ever experienced that before. So yeah, my priorities have changed and my desires have changed. Yeah, so when we're not following the deeper desire, this creates exhaustion, frustration, restlessness. When God becomes the dominant desire, other desires fall into proper order instead of disappearing. So what does that mean? Physical desires are enjoyed without obsession. Emotional desires are expressed without dependence. Intellectual desires are pursued without pride. And life becomes integrated rather than fragmented. So the ultimate desire is not something we have to create. It is the desire that has been quietly driving every other desire all along. I hope you get to that place and ask God to continuously guide you to truth. And it might get kind of rocky before you get to the good stuff. You might have some things fall apart before things fall together. So yeah, I hope that this episode leaves you inspired. I hope that it made sense what I was saying. And yeah, I hope that you all find that true fulfillment. Please hit the like if you like this episode. So yeah, thank you guys. Bye.